What if the most powerful weapons in the world were used against one of the smallest places on Earth? What if an entire population had nowhere left to run? Tonight, this is not a story of politics alone. This is the story of people trapped inside a strip of land under constant fire. This is the story of Gaza. Stay with us until the end, because the final question may be the hardest one of all. Gaza is a narrow strip of land along the Mediterranean Sea. Just 365 square kilometers. More than 2 million people live here. Half of them are children. It is one of the most densely populated places on Earth. To understand the war on Gaza, we must first understand what Gaza is and what it is not. It is not just a battlefield. It is homes, hospitals, schools, memories. History is rarely a smooth line. It is a series of tremors that build up until the Earth finally snaps. October 2023 was the moment the crust of the modern world broke. A 40-kilometer strip of land, home to 2 million souls, became the epicenter of a geopolitical earthquake whose aftershocks are still reshaping our world in 2026. It wasn't just a war between a state and a faction. It was the day the rules-based international order was put on trial. A day that forced every world power to choose a side. And in doing so, changed the map of alliances forever. For the first time in history, we witnessed the gospel, an AI-driven target generation system. War was no longer just about soldiers on the ground. It became a terrifying experiment in algorithmic warfare. In the first few weeks, the sheer scale of destruction surpassed anything seen in the 21st century. But while the bombs were high-tech, the resistance of the human spirit was ancient. Gaza became the most documented conflict in human history. Every classroom, every hospital, and every heartbeat was streamed live to a global audience, bypassing traditional media gatekeepers for the first time. As the casualty figures climbed, a massive rift opened, not just between countries, but within them. In the West, a generation of youth, connected by social media, found themselves in total opposition to their government's policies. This was the moment the post-World War II consensus began to crumble.
القيادة السياسية لإسرائيل من أجل إبادة الشعب الفلسطيني وتهجيره قسريا.
When South Africa took Israel to the International Court of Justice, it wasn't just a legal move. It was a symbolic uprising of the global South. For the first time, the former colonies were using the West's own laws to challenge the West's allies. The world was no longer waiting for permission from Washington. By late 2023, the Gaza earthquake triggered a tsunami in the Red Sea. A group from Yemen, the Houthis, turned a local conflict into a global economic crisis. Shipping lanes that feed the world's economy were choked. The cost of bread in Europe and fuel in Asia became tied to the fate of a hospital in Gaza City. The message was clear. The world is too connected for any conflict to be local anymore. The ripples of Gaza had reached the gas stations of Ohio and the factories of Germany. The shadow of a wider regional war involving Lebanon, Iran, and the US loomed larger than ever. The roots of the Gaza conflict stretch back over a century. After World War I, Palestine fell under British control. Promises were made. Borders were drawn. In 1948, the State of Israel was established. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced. Many fled to Gaza. What began as temporary refuge became permanent exile. Wars followed. Borders tightened. And Gaza became isolated. While Washington was laser-focused on the Middle East, a smile was hidden in Moscow. For the Kremlin, the Gaza earthquake was a geopolitical gift. Every artillery shell sent to the Mediterranean was one shell less for Ukraine. But more importantly, Russia saw its chance to claim the moral high ground. Russia's message to the Arab world and the global South was simple. The West talks about human rights in Ukraine, but remains silent in Gaza. This narrative accelerated a massive shift. By 2026, Russia had successfully repositioned itself as a key power broker in the Middle East, filling the vacuum left by a strained United States. While Russia provided the military alternative, China provided the diplomatic one. Beijing, which historically stayed out of Middle Eastern blood feuds, stepped into the light. They didn't send warships. They sent mediators. Their goal? To show that a Chinese peace is more stable than an American war. China's refusal to condemn resistance movements outright earned it massive soft power points across the global South. By 2026, the yuan started replacing the dollar in key energy contracts. China wasn't just watching the fire in Gaza. They were using its heat to forge a new financial world order. For the United States, Gaza was more than a foreign policy crisis. It was an identity crisis. The Indo-Pacific pivot, the grand strategy to contain China, was put on hold. Washington found itself dragged back into the Middle East quagmire. It had spent a decade trying to leave. The cost wasn't just financial. It was the erosion of the American brand. In the eyes of 1 billion people in 2026, the US was no longer the neutral arbiter of peace. This internal and external strain triggered the most significant reassessment of American global commitments since the end of the Vietnam War. How the war is seen depends on where you are watching from. Different headlines, different words, different truths. Social media becomes a battlefield of its own. Some voices amplified, others silenced. The question becomes, who controls the narrative of suffering?
My fellow citizens, we must uphold unity, stability, and shared purpose.
In 2024 and 2025, the battlefields weren't just in the Middle East. They were on the manicured lawns of the Ivy League. A generation of students, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, broke their silence. For the first time, the narrative taught in textbooks was defeated by the narrative streamed on TikTok. This wasn't just a protest. It was a divorce between the youth and the political establishment. By 2026, this Gaza effect has created a permanent voting bloc in the US and Europe that refuses to accept the old status quo. The youth no longer view the Middle East through the lens of the 20th century, but through the lens of justice and human rights. Europe, caught between its colonial past and its multicultural present, began to crack. In countries like Germany and France, the war in Gaza became a domestic battlefield. Governments reacted with bans and restrictions, leading to a massive debate about the true meaning of free speech in a liberal democracy. The conflict accelerated the rise of two opposing forces, a new, radicalized left that sees Gaza as the ultimate struggle for liberation, and a resurgent right that uses the unrest to fuel anti-immigration rhetoric. By 2026, the middle ground of European politics has effectively vanished. Politicians who thought Gaza was a temporary distraction were proven wrong at the ballot box. From local council seats in the UK to the massive presidential race in the US, the Muslim vote and the youth vote became the new kingmakers. Candidates were forced to answer one question: where did you stand when the bombs fell? The political cost was immense. Entire administrations were toppled or forced into radical policy shifts. By 2026, the unconditional support that once defined Western relations with the Middle East has been replaced by a cautious, scrutinized, and highly controversial diplomatic dance. The world reacts. Statements of concern, calls for restraint, emergency meetings, but action is limited. Aid trucks wait at borders. Ceasefires collapse. Powerful nations debate, while Gaza burns. When the bombing stops, the suffering does not. Rebuilding takes years. Psychological wounds take longer. Children grow up knowing only war. And the question remains, is survival the same as living? By 2026, the guns have mostly fallen silent, but the silence is heavy. Gaza is now a landscape of echoes. Reconstruction has begun, a multi-billion-dollar project funded by a complex mix of Gulf wealth, Chinese engineering, and international aid. But you cannot reconstruct a soul. The children who survived the winter of fire are now the teenagers who will define the next 50 years of resistance. The old Middle East, defined by total American hegemony and a rush toward normalization, died in Gaza. In its place, a new Middle East has emerged. It is a world of pragmatic neutrality. Regional powers like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey are no longer picking sides. Between the East and West, they are building a middle corridor, a power bloc that uses its geography to bargain with both Washington and Beijing. Gaza in 2026 is no longer just a place. It's a global North Star. It has become the symbol for every movement fighting for sovereignty and justice. From the indigenous peoples of the Amazon to the workers in European factories, Gaza has become the universal language for the people versus the machine. The moral compass of the world has shifted south. We began this journey looking at the shadows of history. We end it by realizing that we are the ones who write the next chapter. The earthquake of Gaza was a warning and a wake-up call. The world is redefined. The question is, are we ready to live in this new reality? If you believe that history should be a tool for liberation, not just a record of the past, then you belong here. Like this documentary to honor the truth. Share it to break the silence. And subscribe to join our global community of thinkers. I am your host, and this was the Gaza earthquakes. Until next time, keep listening to the echoes.